Hello, everyone. My name is Karin Tanaka. I'm here with the ASA. So this past Sunday, August 16th, we had our first 2-hour composing challenge called Shortlist. And I am here with Vikrant Muthusamy, and he is one of the winners from Sunday. And unfortunately, during the event, we didn't have time for him to unmute himself and kind of walk us through his composition. So we wanted to circle back and do that now over Zoom. So Vikrant, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So your composition was called Behind the Face, which we'll go into in a little bit. But can you just give first a little background of who you are and how you started composing?
So I've always been a fan of music and film ever since I was like a small kid. Ever since my dad took me to my first film theater when I was like about 4 years old. It was Star Wars: Phantom Menace. And,
Yes.
and one of the things that I always took from that was one, the sound of the whole experience, and also how big everything was. And since then, I was just a huge fan of of the whole film experience. I got into piano when I was that age, and it wasn't until I was 16 that I figured, what if I told, what if I tried that whole, tell stories through music to type thing. So I actually tried that with my Yamaha portable grand piano right there.
Awesome.
And it had this song recording feature that I decided to give it a shot. So, and it had like multiple voices I could use, like string voices, electric guitar voices, drum voices, basically everything under the sun. So I basically just took took that song recording feature, took some ideas I had from movies I watched, from video games I played, and just crafted this kind of makeshift narrative in like that was like 4 minutes long.
Wow.
And that was the first time where I really realized the process of, but I basically scored something to a theoretical film. So that was a moment where I realized that's it. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I've kind of been just looking for gigs and hustling since then.
Wow. So you really just dove in. Are you mostly self-taught?
For the most part, I did take composition classes here and there. And originally, the plan when I was in high school, going into college, was that I would go into UT's composition program. UT Austin was at the top of my list. It was close by. They were a tier 1 school, and it didn't cost an arm and a leg to get in.
Of course.
Right. So I initially wanted to apply for their composition program, but like the complete genius I am, I missed the deadline for applying for it. And the fallback option was this program called Music Recording Technology. That program's going not there anymore, unfortunately, but I met my first music mentor there. And I had a chance to sit down with him and just talk with him regarding, my aspirations about, making music for film. And I really wanted to get into the film school as well. So I wanted to be a double major student, do music and film. So I asked him if there was any way I could gain some film scoring experience, if there was any avenues he knew about. Without saying a word, he went to his laptop and just started typing an email to a film professor he knew on campus, basically setting up my meeting with this film professor named Nancy Scasarmi. The music mentor's name was Gary Powell, by the way. And Gary basically set up my meeting with Nancy, and I showed her some pieces I did during my free time from core classes at UT. She was the first person apart from my mom and dad to say, I like this. And she allowed me to present myself to one of her more advanced undergraduate filmmaking courses. And keep in mind, these are juniors and seniors, and I'm just a freshman.
Right.
I've only been at UT for about 2 months.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I basically put a whole presentation together, show off some stuff that I can do, by playing some samples. And within that first semester, two of her students came to me and asked me to make music for their short films.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's
And
fantastic.
and I basically built on my basically the number of short films I worked on kind of kind of built from there. And I built so much to the point my reputation started growing there as like the go-to guy to make music for UT student films.
Mhm.
Eventually, Nancy recognized that, and during my sophomore year, she asked me if I could make the score for her PBS documentary.
Wow.
which
Wow. Okay. Okay.
which was the biggest thing that happened to me at that time.
That's great. So, what about your career today?
So good. So currently, Nancy and I are actually currently working on our second documentary.
Oh, so you still have a relationship with her. That's great.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. She
That's
is.
what it's all about, honestly.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's fantastic. And so yeah, that first documentary was released in 2017. Right now, we're currently working on the new one. And back in 2018, I decided to start, given that outside of working on client projects, trying to look for filmmakers to make music for, I also figured that maybe maybe I should also take advantage of all the recording tech stuff, all the music production stuff that Gary taught me.
Yeah.
Because honestly, I wouldn't be anywhere here if it wasn't for Gary or Nancy. Having a mentor is just so important, just in general.
Absolutely.
And so in 2018, I decided to start my own service where I help people with their projects. So it used to be just music production projects where I help singers help get their mixes out to a professional sounding mix.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I've kind of slowly been getting into video as well. And I currently run, and currently it's my own music and audio video production house. Eva Ora, that's the logo.
Eva Ora, what a great name.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, let's dive into your piece, Behind the Face. If you can share your screen and talk a little bit about the different ingredients and how you use them.
Okay, all right. So this is a software I've been using for composing. This is Reaper.
Reaper. Okay.
And let me quickly compact everything here. So basically, when I was making this piece, obviously this was the picture you guys gave us to go off of. And when I saw the picture, we had 2 hours to make the big piece, and there were a couple things I was trying to imagine in my mind. The first two things that came to my mind were actually, because of the mask, Phantom of the Opera, and also Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So when I saw that, I figured, maybe the piece I should make, given that it's a 46-second piece, maybe I should make something that kind of maybe shows this kind of revelation of maybe the owner of that mask is past me. Maybe they're hiding something. Maybe they're trying to, maybe they're trying to conceal something from that woman right there.
Okay.
And so I basically could create the whole story in my head. I took the lighting into consideration. I imagine it was like maybe it was a dark night with some moonlight going on. Maybe the moon was out, and basically, so obviously I know that most pieces they usually need they always use like strings and horns and all those types of instruments. But I also wanted to use some. I also wanted to use some woodwind instruments because woodwinds are a really great way of like showing weakness and showing vulnerability.
Yeah, and very underutilized, I think.
Exactly. Especially in the presence of like electronic stuff, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So I figured, no, I really want to go all in on the vulnerable side of this.
Cool.
So when you guys give us secret ingredients, I mean, we had 2 hours to make about 40 seconds of music. So when I saw the image, there were two immediate things that kind of popped into my head. One was because of the mask, Phantom of the Opera, and also because of the lighting and the fact that there was also a woman sleeping by, Bram Stoker's Dracula. So I basically took those two into consideration. So I figured maybe the person with that who owns that mask, maybe they're hiding some really dark secret. Maybe they see that little lady as kind of like their ticket to the lights is somewhat. And I was imagining a very tragic story in my head. So I figured maybe for this 40-second scene, it would probably be like this really good kind of a precursor to a very tragic ending where they reveal something to us that she's not aware of, but now we're about to find out what it is.
Cool.
So, so obviously, well, when I was figuring out the instruments for these, obviously you're familiar with almost every single cue. They use horns, they use strings. It's very typical. Not a whole lot of them use woodwind instruments, and woodwinds are a very good way of just like showing just like overall weakness and vulnerability in characters. I figured that's the route I definitely want to go. I definitely want to go in. And so when I first started composing, I figured, in order to set the mood, given that there's something ominous happening, I decided to start with a very low bass tremolo, bass string tremolo, which sounds something like this. Now that bass does build up over time, but there's not a there's not a whole lot to tamper with it. So when I started adding more instruments to it to show the more kind of vulnerable sides to it. In this case, it was cello and violas, which you will hear here. So still that ominous tone to it, but it's also but now we're trying to invoke a human element into it.
And
So
what libraries are you using?
for these, I'm using Spitfire Studio strings or the symphonic strings. Sorry.
Nice.
Yeah. So this is Spitfire. They just make awesome sounds in general. And so so then I decided to add the much more emotional part to it, and what better way to do that than to add violence to it? So I initially started with the first violins here. But when I added that part in, I thought, okay, maybe I should give a little bit more build up. So I added some second violins to it, which then did which kind of sort of did the trick, but I need a little bit more color to go with it. So that's when I started venturing into the wood instruments here. So initially the first instrument that I added in here was the oboe, because the oboe is just like the go-to instrument for that. So the oboe is the one where I ended up using the motif you guys ended up giving us as one of the secret ingredients.
That
And
was a beautiful treatment of the motif. I loved it.
appreciate it. And but at that point, I also wanted to add it. I also, par for the course, I did want to add percussion instruments to it because the build up towards the end just needed to have that. So so I added timpani, I added bass drum, and some cymbals to it, as well as as well as a gong head towards the very end. And I also added some glockenspiel, uh, glockenspiel like embellishment to go with it. That also playing the same motif as well. This is what it ended up sounding like. So basically, at this point, the high timbres have been taken care of, the low timbres have been taken care of, but now the middle timbres still feels kind of empty, right? So at that point, it's decided, okay, let's add some, let's make the horn,
Nice.
let's add a horn part, and let's add a bassoon, parts. So here's how it sounds originally with the horn part. The horn part was kind of a last minute entry, especially at the beginning, but it definitely helps at the very end. That's how it sounds here perfectly. But now we have a chance to get really picky here. So it sounds good, great. But this is not an epic thing. This is like a very vulnerable, personal story.
Right.
You don't want to make it sound way too epic because at that point you're basically making production library music, right? So that's why I decided this is. So initially, I was having the flute, just basically mimicking the oboe, or mimicking the oboe. But I figured flute only works well towards the end. But also at the same time, the bassoon along with the oboe, is one of my favorite instruments in the world to ever use. Because of how amazing its timbre is. So I figured. Let's make let's give some love to the bassoon, not just at the beginning, but also at the very end. It adds more to the build up, and now we're basically filled with this entire ensemble that is that feels for this character, but at the same time that they can only just sit back and watch and just watch what's happening. And as a result, this is how the entire piece ends up
Perfect.
sounding. And of course, towards the build-up, it's a great place for the final secret ingredient, which is the amazing bell sound.
Oh yes, I was going to ask you about that. So that comes in at the end, correct?
Yes, that comes in at the very end, right here. And I basically felt that was a great like kind of sweetening of like the revelation that the audience is seeing.
Okay.
And here is the entire mix.
Wow, and all done in 2 hours.
Basically, and also one thing you may have noticed with the bell sound, in order to add a little bit more kind of resonance to it, because I really like the resonance of when it was first hit, first hit, but I figured there had to be some sort of an echo, so I actually just ended up adding it in right here again,
Okay.
but basically making it more distant in the
I see.
automation.
Fantastic. So which ingredient do you think was the most difficult to work with?
I mean, personally, when putting all these ingredients together, I personally found it, found all of them. Well, once I figured out the idea, they all kind of meshed very eloquently together, just in general. So, so I mean, obviously, when I was trying to figure it out, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with any of this. But
Yeah.
once you actually get your head in the right position and you start composing with a plan in your head, that's kind of one of the rules I follow whenever I make a new piece of music, or whenever I am working for a client. You have to know what kind of a movie you're telling in your head first before you take your brain and splatter it onto the canvas.
Absolutely. So do you have any advice for anyone trying to, meet a deadline, compose quickly, kind of, spur some creativity in a very short amount of time?
I would say for people who are like, you mean for people who are trying to meet the deadlines in a very short amount of time and they're not sure what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Any
yeah,
sort of advice.
right. I mean, I would say if you see this, I would say, whatever it is you're working on, if you see the story there, if you're able to pick this story out, if you're able to retell the story like in your head, that's really all you really need to make it to make anything. Obviously, not every project is going. You're going to get like you're not going to get an ample amount of time with every single project. I've worked on the things. I mean, that first documentary that I mentioned to you that I worked with Nancy.
Yeah.
It's like it's about an hour long documentary. I got signed on to that 2 years before it got released, and
Oh, wow. Okay.
and a majority of the music that was actually used for that documentary was made about a month before we submitted it for Austin Film Festival.
Okay.
And there have been other cases where I didn't have as much time. I mean, one of my very first scores that I ever got, they literally, the filmmaker, it ended up not working out, but the filmmaker ended up liking what I did. It just wasn't fitting what she was going for, but she liked what I did. But she asked for a 2.5 minute upbeat to type of piece. She sent me that text at 4:30 p.m. and she said she needed it by midnight.
Wow. 2.5 minutes. Okay, so you're no stranger to creating, a lot of music in a short amount of time. Then.
Yeah, I mean, you got to take it how it comes, and you got to remind yourself that telling stories through music, that whole feeling of being able to inspire somebody within a certain amount of time, that's what all composers, that's what we all live for. But we all love telling those stories. We love the forcing people to emote and feel certain things at certain times. And whatever amount of time you're given to do that, make the most of it.
Exactly. So do you think this would have been more difficult had we not given you a mood photo as one of the ingredients?
I would just say, whether you have given me the mood photo or not. I mean, obviously, if you haven't given me the mood photo, I probably wouldn't have made it like that.
Yeah.
Right? I wouldn't have made it in that style or in that fashion. But, I've actually I've grown used to composing stuff in record time. I actually am part of another music production meetup. It's like a shout out for them right now. But I'm actually since like January, I've actually been regularly going to this other music production workshop called Hyperflow,
Okay.
and it was started by house and EDM producers. Now, I'm not a house or EDM producer, but I do love electronic music, and they didn't bar anyone based on their musical skills or musical styles. On who become anyone and anyone who loves music could go into that. So,
Yeah.
and I originally, I remember attending one of them, like I think around September or August, or August, I think, and then to do it until January, and then from January on, I did it regularly because I realized that you know that kind that kind of experience. The way it works is that you're basically all the music producers have basically they spend 8 hours
Mhm.
on a Sunday making 3 pieces of music.
Wow. Okay.
And you basically had an hour and a half for each of the pieces to work on it. It didn't matter how long it was, and they had some time towards the end to just edit and like polish it up however you want. And I've actually been able to make quite a few pieces just around that, and that kind of experience has actually definitely really prepared me for this challenge, which is why I definitely stepped onto it.
Oh, okay. So this is something that you normally engage in then.
Yeah, composing stuff in a very short amount of time
Uh,
is something I am familiar with, and I've grown to have fun with.
Okay. Well, it definitely shows. I mean, I think what your decisions were and how you treated the photo and the story you told were very good, especially since we only gave you 2 hours and, the ingredients were somewhat random. I thought what you came up with was so impressive. So
Thank you.
I want to thank you for sharing and kind of taking us into your workstation. I know that's very helpful for people to see that. It does remind me of the different score studies that the ASA puts on. So we do very similar things, and we don't look at DAWs, but we do look at scores and kind of the breakdown of them. And it's very interesting to hear. So yeah, I'm glad we got a chance to chat a little bit. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to chat on Sunday, but this is longer, so this is better. So thank you, and I look forward to having you at our future events, and hopefully we'll do some more 2 hour challenges.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Vikrant.
Thank you so much, Karen.